Ethan Salas, the guy's 17 years old. And I was reading, it wasn't MLB.com, but obviously another publication with Kylie McDaniel, ESPN, about him, and Bryce Harper was mentioned in there. And I think those are, maybe it's okay to compare the two, but obviously Ethan Salas didn't grow up, in America in the high school and just the traditional route there. How do you see Ethan Salas fitting in here in this Padres team down the road? Like, when do you see him possibly debuting? And this is obviously probably pretty difficult to predict because this isn't just a position player, it's a catcher. And sometimes catchers do take more time to develop. But AJ Preller hasn't been afraid to rush guys. I don't want to say rush, but really fast track guys. If he sees something, he's not afraid to test them at higher levels. And he's already through Lake Elsinore, and now he's already up at High A in Fort Wayne. So, what do you think of Ethan Salas so far? And just where do you see him fitting in eventually?
Yeah, no, I mean, the Harper comparison's interesting. I mean, they're different types of players, but in terms of like being uncommonly talented and advanced at age 17, I can see that part of it. He's not going to have, he won't have Bryce's power, but he's going to play power. And I mean, it's hard to think of guys to compare to Ethan Salas, honestly. I mean, he's 17, he's in high A as a catcher. I don't know if I've ever remembered that happening before, and I've been covering prospects for 30 years, a 17-year-old in high A. And he is super advanced. He was born in Florida, so he spent some time in the States. He's fluent in both English and Spanish. It's not just, we'll get to the physical tools in a second, but like grew up around the game. Like he's got relatives who play baseball. His brother, was drafted or signed by the Marlins, traded to the Twins in the offseason. So he's grown up around the game, so he kind of knows what to expect. Like we interviewed him on our podcast back, I want to say, I can't remember if it was late January, early February, shortly after he signed. He's very comfortable, very mature. He it's not just physical tools. He has a good approach at the plate. He understands some of the technical standpoints of catching. He, communicates well, like runs a pitching staff amazingly well for a 17-year-old. So it's like you almost have to throw the age out the window. And then the tools, I mean, we could be talking plus hit, plus power, plus arm, plus field. It's not going to be plus run because he's a catcher, but he runs close to average. In terms of getting, to San Diego, I mean, it seems like he's kind of on track to get there at 19 years old, whether that's the end of 2025 or the first couple months of 2026. And, maybe, he might be quicker. I mean, at the rate he's going, maybe he's quicker than that, Ben. I mean, I do like to say, I mean, the guys who are the special talents, they just destroy any timetable and they get there when they're ready, which is quicker than expected. I mean, Jackson Merrill's kind of doing, I mean, he's not going to get to the big leagues when he's 19 because he's 20 already, but like Jackson Merrill's probably going to be in the big leagues next year at this rate, 3 years after being drafted out of high school. And I just think the special talents, you can sit there and put an ETA or say, okay, here's kind of the development plan. Like I remember going through this. He was just in the news because I think the Mariners, I don't know if they retired his number or put him in their Ring of Honor, but like Felix Hernandez, was celebrated in Seattle, I think last weekend. And it was the same thing. Like Felix was so advanced at like age 17. And it was like, okay, we want him to do, pitch this many innings at this many levels. And Felix just blew past all that and got to Seattle even quicker. I mean, A-Rod did that. Ken Griffey Jr. did that. And, I think the guys who are really special players, you can sit there and kind of say, okay, this is what makes sense. And they blow it up. So I think he's going to blow it up.
So you could see this potentially as something where, let's say the Padres, they have Luis Camposano be the catcher for a couple years, or they bring back Gary Sanchez because that's worked so far, and they give him a couple years. And after that contract is up, you could just see Ethan Salas ending up being the guy there, and maybe Camposano still on the roster, have that combination right when Salas comes up.
Yeah, and honestly, I think it's one of those things. I think when Ethan Salas is ready, and again, he's 17. I'm not saying it's going to be tomorrow, but he's better than Luis Camposano. He's better than Gary Sanchez. And even if those guys are under contract or, whoever's on the roster, it's the same thing. Like when Ethan Salas tells you, I'm ready to play in the big leagues, It does not matter who you have at catcher or what the plan is or what the contracts are. Ethan Salas is going to be your catcher. So yeah, he's that talented. I mean, I was talking to somebody with the Padres when we were working on our top 100 prospects list, and he said that they had another team tell them that considering his age and how many years, obviously, of play he has ahead of him, that this other team considered Ethan Salas the most valuable player in baseball. And that includes big leaguers because he's this good at 17 and is going to have however many years of a major league career. Like, I mean, this guy is crazy, crazy talented.
Yeah, that is very high praise. And AJ, I don't think it's AJ, right? It's Chris Kemp, I believe, that did like the main work on Ethan Salas. Is that do you
Yeah,
think
I
that's
think
correct?
he's in charge international. I mean, I think AJ is more heavily involved in some of this stuff than probably all like your amateur and international stuff than your typical GM is, because that's where his background was and he loves it. But yeah, I mean, there are a lot of people who obviously did work on it. But yeah, I mean, it's like he's incredibly, ridiculously good.
Yeah, and I just bring that up with Chris Kemp because there's been a lot of talented young players that have come into the Padres organization, and it's not just through the draft. So I just want Padres fans to
Yep.
be aware of
You're
that.
true.
And not all of them have hit, right? There's been some disappointments. There's been some injuries, right? With Adrian Morejon and Michelle Baez. He's still in the Padres system in the minor leagues after getting some major league time. So it's not a guarantee for all of these guys to hit. But Ethan Salas, it's just on a totally different level than what praise any of former Padres prospects were receiving when they first came into the system. And again, Ethan Salas is 17. So I don't want to put these super high expectations on him, but other people are doing that for me. And so it's like, and that know this obviously way better than I do. So it's hard for me to sit here and be like, well, just Padre fans, lower the expectations. Now, he's not going to be here tomorrow, like you said, but I think the Padres, after having a long history of not being able to have that like star catcher, I think that time can come here in a couple years, a few years. So we'll see what happens there